Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Dharma podcast. In today's episode, I will narrate the unknown story of a stenographer named KVS Manian. And like all of you, even I had not heard the name of KVS Manian until about 10 years ago. And in fact, I discovered him and his tragic story by accident when I was researching for my book titled 70 Years of Secularism. So the question is, who is KVS Manian and why am I talking about him and why is he so important? Shri KVS Manian is not just a person. He is a symbol of countless Indians who awakened to a questionable freedom at midnight on August 15th, 1947. In real life, KVS Manian was a poorly paid stenographer working in the office of the Director General, Civil Aviation. And then, on the 12th of December 1948, the hell called the Nehruvian state paid him a personal visit. This is his story. But before we get into it, let me give you a brief background first. From the perspective of Hindu civilization, from the perspective of the Sanatana culture and society, the history of independent India is an ongoing commentary on the darkness and misery that Nawab Nehru inflicted on the country. Mr. KVS Manian's story actually begins after Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's assassination on January 30th, 1948. In fact, Gandhi's assassination was the preface to Nawab Nehru's dictatorship. It gave Nawab Nehru the perfect excuse to impose an unwritten emergency on the newly independent India. Instead of trying to rebuild an ancient civilization that had suffered so much for so long, Nawab Nehru started playing a series of dirty games, all games aimed at consolidating his personal power. And one of his first moves in this dirty game of Nawab Nehru's power politics was to summarily ban the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh or the RSS. This story of the RSS ban is quite well known, but what is lesser known is this. The ban on the RSS was imposed without due process or without a fair trial or inquiry. And so, Gandhi's assassination also gave the perfect excuse that the Congress and other RSS haters were unsuccessfully looking for so many decades to somehow tame the RSS, to somehow ban it, to somehow check its growing power. This point, this ban, also raises another important historical question. The ban on the RSS was imposed by a political party which had just proved that it was too powerless to prevent the partition of India's sacred geography along Islamic lines. The Congress had also proved, and it continues to demonstrate, that it is completely spineless against a determined community which calls itself as a minority. And so, this is exactly what the great doyen of Indian history, Shri R.C. Majumdar, this is what he meant when he said the following, and I quote him, "Jinnah's fight was not a fight for the freedom of India, but for the freedom of the Muslims. He won the fight. The cult of violence decided the issue." To what extent Gandhi's cult of non-violence may claim credit for the freedom of India is a matter of opinion. But there is no doubt that the creation of Pakistan was a triumph of violence in its naked and most brutal form. Close quote. Yet, after India attained independence, the new political leadership headed by the Congress banned the RSS, an organization which till the very end doggedly fought to prevent the partition and to unite Hindus in every sphere. Now, Nawab Nehru also had a long-term, a highly poisonous vision when he banned the RSS for 18 months. I call this poisonous vision and the consequence as the Great Nehruvian Purge. I repeat, it was the Great Nehruvian Purge. This was an extremely sinister project which set the foundation of a narrative of non-stop Hindu demonization in the Hindu motherland. It was a sustained campaign of naked political slander and labeling. In fact, a highly toxic and a highly durable label that this Nehruvian narrative invented back then was this, just two words: RSS agent. And thanks to the dirty tricks department of the Congress, RSS agent were precisely two words that were enough to frighten even the most learned and the most respected scholar. It was enough to immediately shut down any debate. And now, let's look at a few highlights of this great Nehruvian purge. It included a Stalinist manhunt of the entire nation to round up anybody who was remotely suspected to have links with the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Such people would suffer exemplary punishment, which included but was not limited to jail term and loss of livelihood. The purge was diabolical in intent, cold-blooded in its execution, and devastating in the outcome that it achieved. And you know where the greatest success of this great Nehruvian purge was achieved? It was achieved in the administration and bureaucracy. In one overnight stroke, it terrorized all government employees, whether they had RSS sympathies or not. They could well be pure-hearted nationalists and genuine patriots with no affiliation to any organization. And so, the great Nehruvian purge had created a situation within a year after independence where it was a shame to be a patriot and it was fatal to be known as a nationalist. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what Nawab Nehru had reduced the whole freedom movement into. And now, let me give you just one official proof of the great Nehruvian purge of the RSS. I will read out a sample from a letter of the establishments section to the Home Minister dated April 8, 1949. Quote, the Chief Commissioner of Police forwarded to us on 28/12/1948 a list of government employees who had been arrested and convicted for their association with or participation in RSS activities. The names and particulars of the employees were forwarded by us to the ministries concerned with instructions regarding the departmental action to be taken in all such cases. Close quote. I think further explanation is unnecessary, and it is at this point that Shri KVS Manian enters the scene. Sometime in early December 1948, the RSS had taken out a peaceful satyagraha in Delhi in the vicinity of Mr. KVS Manian's house. Now let's read what happened next in Manian's own words, and I quote him. On the afternoon of the 5th or 6th December 1948, I was inside my home practicing shorthand when I heard a lot of noise outside. My young child, who was playing outside, came with tears in her eyes and she was crying. I naturally got out to see what was happening. When I came out, I found that tear gas had been used. Seeing the state of my child and out of sympathy for her, I spoke to the police officer near my house, protesting against the use of tear gas without regard to the presence of children. The officer, thinking that I was interfering with his work, ordered me to accompany him to the police station at Faiz Bazaar, where I was detained for a night. The next day, when produced before the court, I explained to the magistrate the circumstances which led to my being brought to the police station. On tendering my apology to the magistrate, I was let off. My apology was only with regard to my having attempted to interfere with a police officer. At no time did I admit to having participated in the RSS movement, since I had nothing to do with the same. Close quote. The court accepted his apology and the judge set him free after giving him a warning. But KVS Manian's real nightmare began after this. On December 28, 1948, the Delhi Chief Commissioner of Police forwarded a list of government employees, quote, who had been arrested and convicted for their association with or participation in RSS activities to the Home Ministry. The unfortunate name of KVS Manian was also in this list. And what happened next is even more sinister. In a perverse interpretation of the law, a bureaucrat in the Home Ministry decided that the court's acquittal of Manian actually meant that Manian was convicted. But in the bureaucrat's mind, even this conviction was not enough. He decided further that KVS Manian needed a stronger dose, the termination of his employment. This decision triggered a chain of prolonged bureaucratic exchanges among various branches and departments and ministries. And finally, on March 3, 1949, KVS Manian received a memo from the Director General Civil Aviation stating that he was dismissed from service with immediate effect for his participation in the activities of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Close quote. And poor KVS Manian was naturally horrified. He wrote a gut-wrenching appeal to reconsider. It makes for really painful reading, but this is how Manian's letter concludes. His appeal, this is how it concludes, and I quote him. I am a man with a family to support, and a blow of this kind is far too severe for me to contemplate. I pray that you may have regard to the circumstances of the case and revise your decision to discharge me from service. Close quote. But the DG of Civil Aviation was unmoved and heartless. And this time, KVS Manian directly appealed to the Home Minister, and the same process was repeated with the same outcome. Many RSS-hating bureaucrats in the government were determined to kill Manian's livelihood for his unproven crime of having links to the RSS. And this time, their determination was on a much more cruel level. Now, let me read out a sample of the kind of language that was used by senior bureaucrats in deciding Manian's fate this time around. Quote, no leniency should be shown in such cases, since the lightness of the punishment awarded by the court could not be admissible as a plea for reinstatement of the released employee. We give our opinion that dismissal would be the most appropriate punishment in the case of Mr. Manian. Close quote. Then, what happens next is even more horrifying. These perverse bureaucrats keep on sending repeated requests to various government agencies asking them to somehow find out at least one scrap of information that somehow linked Manian to the RSS. And finally, there was a genius named Mr. R. Dayal who came up with a rather innovative conclusion. This Dayal was the Deputy Commissioner of Police for Delhi. I will read out directly from this R. Dayal's letter dated May 4th, 1949. Quote, the mere fact that Shri KVS Manian took part in an open demonstration in support of the RSS, an association declared unlawful by the government, is in itself a conclusive proof of the disloyalty of this government servant. His association with the RSS must have been fairly pronounced. Close quote. Note the words in his letter. Must have been. So just because even though he was in the vicinity of this RSS meeting, just because he went to inquire what was happening with the cop, why they were using tear gas against children, just because he committed that kind of a crime, the punishment was a blatant dismissal, flouting all rules, all laws. And now we come to the climax of Mr. KVS Manian's story. This is even more tragic than the torture that he underwent. Here is a sample from another letter dated May 26th, 1949, written by a senior Home Ministry official, and I quote him. Manian's trial was summary, and you know that in such cases, no record of evidence is kept. What was established, however, is that the accused joined a procession and raised slogans. Close quote. See how, this injustice upon injustice is being piled by none less than serving senior bureaucrats and even, top-ranking IPS officials, none less than none less than the rank of deputy commissioner. So this is how this chain of alleged evidence of Mr. Manian's crime is built up. And at this stage, Mr. KVS Manian's sad story ends. And we don't know what happened to Mr. Manian after this, but his story is preserved in the National Archives. It is online. The entire chain of documentation, bureaucratic correspondence, and margin notings are all preserved in absolute detail. So here is the full summary of the whole story. Who was Shri KVS Manian to begin with? Shri KVS Manian was just a humble stenographer who worked in the office of the Director General of the Civil Aviation and who generally minded his own business, kept his head down, practiced his shorthand, did his work, went home, and was, as a responsible middle class citizen, feeding his family. And for such a man, for no fault of such a humble man, Mr. Manian became one among the innumerable victims of Nawab Nehru's irrational hatred of the RSS and his aversion for his own Hindu civilizational roots. And so the underlying theme of KVS Manian's tragic story is not just about his dismissal. Neither is it only about the RSS. It is about the overall character. It is about the basic character and nature of India's top political leadership just after independence. This political leadership, which wanted to somehow create a new nation by slaughtering its unbroken cultural heritage. And who knows how many Manians are still there, how many Manians are still weeping in their graves, just waiting for someone to hear the story of their injustice. Who knows how many Manians are there? And on that rather sad note, we can conclude today's episode. If you found this episode interesting and useful and informative, please click the like button. Subscribe to the Dharma Dispatch YouTube channel and do share our videos with your family and friends. Please also consider making a contribution to our work so that we can offer more such episodes. And if you wish to have access to our exclusive content, please do become a member of our channel. Namaste, Vande Mataram.